Of Indiana County, it's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. He is Indiana County District Attorney Bob Manzi joining us this morning here in Indiana in the Morning. Our conversation is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Personal Injury Law Firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Todd. How are you today?
Wonderful, beautiful morning today. You get a chance to get out and walk in this fresh, crisp air. Nice, huh?
It's a beautiful morning, and when you hear about spring training starting next week and baseball is right upon us,
I knew that would get you.
That'll put a smile on my face.
Hey, there are a lot of things happening legally around Indiana County. Unfortunately, you start with the story last week of the infant homicide or homicide investigation, let's put it that way. That is the going on, a case that originated in Indiana Borough. Always sad and always very, very difficult for investigators to carry out their work there. I know that you, as a district attorney and your staff involved in this, but you really feel for the police officers that have to do that, the detectives that are doing their work, everybody involved. There's no good outcomes that can come from this.
And that's one of the items that we talked about at the press conference last week. This is a horrific case. He had a 9-month-old baby that was killed by his mother, which is a horrific case. Any type of homicide is. When you have young children that never had a chance to live their life, to find out who they were going to be and what they were interested in, everybody involved in a case carries that with them and in a different way. And we spend a lot of time focusing on people within the criminal justice system, how you're processing the stress that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. The men and women of our law enforcement in Indiana Borough, in the state police, in every department in Indiana County and across the state and across the country, they're dealing with terrible situations every shift. They may go from a child abuse call to a suicide call to a senior in need, and they're dealing with a great deal of stress each and every day. So we spend a lot of time talking about how are you processing that internally, which is why, I always say, compartmentalizing that and being able to address that. People will say, well, how do police deal with it? How do firefighters deal with it? How do emergency services deal with it? And they process it in a way where, I think only other people in the field can understand that.
Yeah. A mental health professional would be able to help with that, and I'm sure that there are many who seek the help of mental health professionals to help them through that whole process, because it is traumatic for them. And as you said, they'll see it every day in some form or another, and you can't just keep that stuff all bottled up within you. So that's one thing about an investigation such as this, but the overriding thing is the loss of a life here. And the terrible circumstances by which that occurred. And that legal process will go forward, and we'll follow that and the investigation and all the hard work that goes into that. That is one of several cases, of course, that you're dealing with. One of the things that you mentioned just before I opened the microphone this morning was people reporting sexual abuse, sexual assault.
Yeah, since I took office, one of the big things that I always ask our community is, when you see something, say something. Mm-hmm. There are only so many police officers that are employed in our county, and we have 80-some thousand people that live here. So when you see something, we're not asking you to decide, is it child abuse, is it not, is it something I should report? Leave it to the professionals to determine that. And we've had a number of cases, especially over the last year, where I really want to give credit to the community, whether it's drug dealing cases, whether it's abuse of a minor, whether it's an abuse of a senior or some other vulnerable population. People have really stepped up and said, I want to report this. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm going to let the professionals investigate it and decide. Mm-hmm. And there's times where we get a call and we investigate and it's nothing, and the member of the community says, well, I'm happy it's nothing. I prefer it to be nothing, but I'm glad you looked into it. And we've had a lot of times where, unfortunately, it was something. We just had one defendant who pled guilty to 5 rape charges and an attempted rape charge. He's going to be sentenced in May. And I was a community member that kind of helped somebody come forward with that. Anytime that members of the community see something, we're asking them to bring that forward for us to investigate. Because a lot of times that's where our cases are coming from. An individual isn't sure, they're hesitant to report it, they're scared, they're dealing with a lot of emotions. Mm-hmm. And when they're able to bring that forward to us and our investigators look into it, gather that necessary evidence, then we're able to hold that person accountable and stop them from doing it to somebody else down the road.
Yeah, there are people who say, I just don't want to get involved. But in the case of calling in something and asking you folks to take over the investigation, or their police agency to take over the investigation, they don't get involved. It's simply a matter of saying, this is something you might want to take a look at, and you take over, and I'm out of it, and you're perfectly fine with that.
We're perfectly fine with it. If somebody calls and really points us in a direction and says, hey, you really need to look into this, you really need to look into that, we then have a lot of investigative tools that will help us get there. Mm-hmm. And you know, whether that results in charges or convictions, you know, sometimes just having the police paying attention to a particular person, that person will stop whatever they're doing, or maybe it stops them from doing something much worse. But we always ask those individuals in the community, we get it. We get, you know, this is a field we work in and we're used to it. A lot of people don't want to be involved for a number of reasons. Call our tip line, call your police departments, talk to the police officer you know, point us in the right direction, and that is really a great help in stopping future crime from happening in our county.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most underrated aspects of what it is that a district attorney does, is on the other side of the crime. Before it occurs, doing whatever they can to stop it. That's why you have seminars for school students. So you go into schools, you talk to them, you talk to people at senior centers and everything. I know you've got an event coming up in May, too, don't you?
We do. We have our Senior Summit 2024 scheduled at the end of May. Right now it's tentatively May 29th. All of our partners on the Elder Abuse Task Force are involved. We actually have one of our planning meetings this afternoon. And we're going to be getting together to really focus on what items can we bring to our seniors and our vulnerable populations to educate them and prevent crime. I much rather prevent crime than have to address it after it happens. I think we all do. By having these, you know, we have our main summit in May, and then we go to the senior centers around our county throughout the year. And we try to get to as many seniors as we can and their families to provide that education in how to prevent you from being the victim of a fraud. Many times if you become the victim, the money's lost and there's just no way to get it back. But by providing that education, we stop it from happening.
The cyber attack on Pennsylvania's Unified Justice website, and I don't know how deep it goes into other Pennsylvania Department of Justice things, but did that affect anything in the way that you're able to do your job?
It really didn't. We were unable to access the main website for a day. I know that the AOPC had a lot of good people working on that. We were back up and running with that within one workday. Mm-hmm. So the day it happened, at least in our office, it really didn't change much of what we did. I know the state had a lot that they were working on, but they got that taken care of pretty quickly. Yeah,
they're still working to recover some things, but then that's another of the underrated aspects of the job is there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and when something like this occurs, well, you're feeling what a lot of people who have been the victims of cyber attacks have felt, and that is, oh boy, I got to start from scratch and rebuild here, and that's an unfortunate reality in today's world that when people get into your files, it's awful hard to get them back out of there. And I know that concerns you. Anything that is scammy or is cyber attack, those things are just insidious, and it's hard to get them out.
Yeah, and it's just something that we all have to be cognizant of in our work world and in our personal world by doing a lot of the basics. Keeping our passwords to ourselves, changing our passwords on a regular basis, checking your credit card bills each month to make sure there's not charges on there that you didn't make. One of the scams that was going around is they weren't making very large purchases. They were making purchases of $20, $10. But they were doing it to a lot of credit cards every month, and because it was such a small amount, people didn't notice. So really taking that extra time in your personal life to go through and make sure everything's done well, your passwords are changed on a regular basis, as well as your professional world. You know, don't be clicking on the emails that comes and it looks like it's a scam. If it looks like it's a scam, take that extra second to look at the email that it's coming from, because it's probably a scam.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because when you're watching your favorite mystery show or whatever it is, there's always one mistake that the criminal makes, and that one mistake lets police in. What happens if they don't make that mistake? You know, we get these emails all the time. Dear sir, hope you have a nice day. And then they start in, well, you know, just reading the preview, that's as soon as you see that address, you delete that baby, get it out of the system. But what happens when they don't? When they're slick enough, and especially with AI now these days, they're able to get in. It's awful difficult for folks. It really calls for vigilance.
It really does. And you know, these thieves, when I go to senior centers, what I say is, these thieves, that's their full-time job. And I don't want to give them any credit, but they're good at what they do. They're good at being thieves. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be something that you look at, that you're vigilant on. And a lot of it is just taking that time. We're all very busy. We all have a lot going on. Sometimes it's just taking that second to say, wait a second, this person wouldn't be emailing me and asking me for money this way. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
I always say, really take that time, slow down, trust your gut. If your gut says this doesn't make sense, it's a scam.
Yeah. Something smelly, there's a reason.
There's always something. If we sit back and trust our gut, we're going to be in good shape.
He is District Attorney Bob Manzi joining us this morning here in Indiana in the Morning. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. Now, as I told you before, next month we'll be in the midst of our Pirate Spring training reports at this time. If you want to come over, you would be talking to one of the Bucko announcers, and maybe you could grill them a little bit about Pirate season. You'd do that, wouldn't you?
Anytime to talk baseball, I'm happy to do that.
It's 8:24 in the morning. It's Indiana in the Morning on the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com.